guns, gold, and geopolitics.
Power ends the moment a nation realizes the world no longer fears it. The Suez Crisis was not a regional dispute. It was the moment Britain and France learned publicly that their era as global arbiters was over. Egypt's President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal in July 1956, seizing control of the artery that powered European trade. Britain and France, desperate to preserve their declining imperial leverage, conspired with Israel to retake the canal by force. The plan was covert, coordinated, and designed to appear accidental. Israel would invade Sinai, Britain and France would intervene as peacekeepers and reclaim the canal. The operation unfolded. Victory seemed secure. Then the United States shut it down. Eisenhower refused to support the invasion, threatened financial retaliation, and made it clear that the post-war order no longer tolerated imperial unilateralism. Britain and France withdrew under pressure. The world watched as two former empires obeyed a new hegemon. This was the pivot point, the symbolic end of European primacy, the beginning of American global dominance. Suez mattered because it exposed structural truths. Britain and France still possessed armies, fleets, and colonial footprints, but they no longer controlled the economic mechanisms that sustained global power. Post-war reconstruction depended on the dollar, global trade relied on American finance, Western security depended on NATO, not imperial navies. When Washington withdrew support, London and Paris lost their strategic oxygen. The crisis revealed something deeper. The old model of coercion was no longer viable in a world where legitimacy was tied to superpower approval. Nasser understood this. His nationalization was not ideological theater. It was a calculated move to assert independence within a decolonizing world. The Arab states rallied behind him. The Soviet Union exploited the moment to expand influence. The United States positioned itself as the new broker of Middle Eastern politics. Suez became the template for how regional actors exploit great power friction and how declining states face forced realignment. Modern geopolitics still lives inside the Suez logic. Great powers maintain influence not only through force, but through the perception that they can guarantee outcomes. Once that perception breaks, deterrence fractures. Allies drift, rivals advance. The United States now stands where Britain once stood, powerful but increasingly contested. Russia's moves in Syria, China's Belt and Road acquisitions, Iran's regional entrenchment, and the fracturing of Western alliances all reflect a world testing whether Washington can still impose outcomes the way it did in 1956. The lesson of Suez is that power erodes first in credibility, not capability. At the same time, middle powers, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, India, the UAE, behave with increasing autonomy. They follow Nasser's model, leverage superpower competition, extract concessions, and expand influence under a shifting ceiling. The canal itself remains central. Its obstruction in 2021 by a single container ship exposed the fragility of global logistics and reinforced the underlying lesson. Choke points decide leverage. The Suez Crisis established a blueprint still visible today. A regional actor asserts control over a strategic asset. A declining power attempts to enforce its old position. A rising or dominant power intervenes to redefine the rules. The outcome reshapes alliances and reorders influence. This pattern recurs in the South China Sea, in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea shipping lanes. The actors change, the mechanism remains constant. Control of trade routes, legitimacy in international systems, and alignment with dominant financial structures still decide the hierarchy. Suez demonstrated that once a state depends on another for financial stability, it loses strategic autonomy. That logic governs today's dollar system, China's creditor diplomacy, and the role of sanctions in modern coercion. The world is approaching another Suez moment, not through a canal, but through the question of who can impose consequences. If American financial dominance erodes, if currency alternatives mature, if regional blocs consolidate, the credibility structure underpinning US power begins to thin. States will test limits as NASA did, probing where influence ends and where autonomy begins. The next reversal will not announce itself through invasion. It will appear through small fractures, treaty drift, contested logistics, independent energy alignments, and defiance that goes unanswered. Suez shows that once perception breaks, the collapse is swift. History does not repeat, but the architecture of power does.